SCP Spinoff, SCP Chaos. Chapter 1. I apologize, but I must conceal my real name due to security factors. However, you can call me Frederick, a common name in Greenland, where all this horror began. I am neither a scientist nor a warrior, just a regular technical staff member of the organization. My main task for the past few years has simply been to check electrical lines, improve lighting systems, and support essential machinery in various secret facilities scattered amidst the desolate ice mountains. It was enough work to sustain me until the day I uncovered terrifying secrets that should never have been revealed. Everything started in the middle of winter when the sun peeked out for only a few hours before disappearing, leaving behind a night sky filled with the whispers of wind howling through the biting cold ice formations. That night, I was rechecking the central electrical panel when, suddenly, the alarm blared. The sound drilled into my eardrums, insistent and urgent. At first, I thought it was a technical malfunction, so I grabbed a flashlight and ran into the corridor to see what was happening. No one was in the long corridor, bathed in flickering red light. At the end of the hall, the metal door was tightly shut, the floor was slick and cold, and I distinctly smelled burnt charcoal lingering somewhere. A sense of unease suddenly overwhelmed me. I faintly heard voices echoing through a handheld radio, a man's breathless voice. "They've escaped. The cell block is compromised." Then the sound cut off. The signal seemed to be jammed by someone or something. Before I could react, a series of lights flickered wildly from the corridor behind me. A piercing, grating sound like metal scraping assaulted my ears. Then I heard footsteps. Actually, it was worse than footsteps. It sounded like claws digging into the concrete floor, dragging, tearing long gouges into the surface. Desperately, I pressed the emergency control room's communication button. "There's something here, northeast, corridor 3. But no one answered. The organization was trained to deal with all scenarios, but this time, something seemed to be beyond control. I remembered some internal rumors about files. SCP-682, the Indestructible Reptile, SCP-096, the shy guy with a brutal rage when someone sees its face, or SCP-076, the bloodthirsty being emerging from a stone coffin. And dozens of other absurd things that only by witnessing firsthand could one understand why people were willing to build formidable prisons just to contain them. I didn't know which entity had escaped and wasn't sure I wanted to know. I fumbled my way through the corridor. My flashlight beam danced across the concrete walls, each step filled with dread that the gruesome scraping sound would resonate behind me. Then I approached a metal door leading to the observation room. A red light flickered from within, casting a long streak across the floor through the crack. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open, hoping to find someone. Inside, the monitoring screens spun wildly as if about to shatter. Glass fragments were scattered everywhere, and the equipment rack vibrated rhythmically. I realized that all security cameras in the special containment zone had gone dark, except for one. It flickered a blurred image, and the camera's angle seemed to be in Kin's cell, where SCP-682 was held. I shivered when I saw the steel wall breached, the acid water used to submerge its body splashed everywhere. Worse, I saw no trace of the entity in the frame. This meant 682 had escaped. I had heard of it, a creature that hates all life. If it got out of here, I couldn't imagine what would happen. Suddenly, a terrifying cry for help erupted from the left side of the room. I spun around. On the floor, a man in a white lab coat, presumably a researcher, lay face down, his back drenched in blood. He was still breathing faintly. I rushed to help him sit up, shaking him and asking, "Are you alive? What just happened? How do I turn off this alarm?" The man looked at me, his eyes wide with panic, his voice broken. Cell D13. They're fighting each other. SCP-096, SCP-682. The bulkhead has fallen. He passed out. I hurriedly grabbed the radio, but only static crackled. Confused, I gently moved him to a corner of the room, propping him behind a wall, installing an old system, and placing a wooden crate for cover. The observation room lights continued to flicker, then went completely dark. Darkness descended, with only the single screen still showing a blurry image. In those few seconds of deadly silence, I heard something that almost made me scream. Growls mixed with the sound of metal being torn apart echoed from afar. I understood the nightmare had begun, and this battle might not be confined to just one containment chamber. Suddenly, the internal loudspeaker system sputtered, then emitted a piercing sound. In an instant, the strained voice of Anori, another security officer, rang out. All units evacuate. Code red. We have too many dangerous entities escaping simultaneously. Meet at the rendezvous point? Her voice faded. At least I knew someone else was alive. I ducked low, sweeping my flashlight around for a weapon. In a corner, an old stun gun with 7 or 8 rounds, but only enough to briefly incapacitate minor entities. As for SCP-682, heaven knows, I grabbed the gun thinking, at least it's something. I heard the injured man mumble. I turned back, he clutched my hand, stammering, "It's not just 682, there are others stronger. They're gathering about to." He couldn't finish his sentence before his eyes rolled back. I panicked, shaking him, but it was useless. The dim light from the single screen reflecting off his lifeless face only intensified the horror within me. I gently laid the man down, muttering apologies for being unable to do more. Then I turned and left the room, the door closing, separating me from the nameless corpse whose identity I hadn't even learned. As I stepped outside, a series of explosions shook the entire facility. The floor vibrated violently, the concrete ceiling cracked, fragments of plaster fell, and the temperature seemed to rise abruptly, despite the extreme cold outside. My instinct told me to evacuate, to leave this place immediately. But we were in the middle of a research facility built underground beneath the ice, surrounded by tens of kilometers of barren land, with no hope of rescue. More importantly, there were surely more people inside this building. They were hiding somewhere, trying to escape the deranged entities. I ran down the corridor, my heart pounding, each turn a labyrinth. The emergency lights cast flickering red streaks, warning of a hell that had just opened. I hardly encountered anyone. Instead, I only saw a few bloodstains smeared along the walls, broken weapons, or doors torn open as if a giant hand had ripped them apart. Finally, I faintly heard hurried footsteps. Hiding behind a corner, I saw 4 or 5 security personnel carrying large metal crates. Scramble, or something similar, was etched on them. It seemed to be equipment to deal with SCP-096. Behind them, Anori appeared, her face urgent. She saw me, waving frantically. "Frederick, hurry. We have to get out of here before 682 and 96 continue their rampage." I rushed to join them, my voice trembling. "How far have they spread?" Anori gritted her teeth. "Everywhere, and worse, there are signs that other things, even more dangerous than 682, are appearing in experimental zone. Many say it's SCP-001 or an ancient entity that has just awakened. We don't have enough forces to contain them all." The group hurried forward. I wondered why such a large-scale breakout coincided with the harshest blizzard night. Was it external interference, or did the destructive nature of these entities lead them to each other, sparking an unprecedented war? I didn't know. Perhaps I didn't want to know, but I understood clearly that from this moment on, our fate hung by a thread. Somewhere in the deserted corridors, monsters were moving, waiting to kill. The cold outside was not as terrifying as the cold in my heart. Fear was consuming every cell. And before this night ended, we might all have to face the most abominable, most powerful things the organization had ever tried to keep locked away. Chapter 2. We crossed the central corridor, where there used to be a small fountain to humidify the entire system. Now it was just a pile of rubble, water trickling and freezing in the extreme temperature, making the floor slick. The alarm continued to blare, and I could see the red rotating symbol on the security doors, signaling the highest emergency level. Anori led us to the right, towards the storage area. She said this area had a shortcut leading to the emergency elevator to the surface. The security personnel behind us clutched their scramble gearboxes. I vaguely knew it was designed to prevent direct eye contact with SCP-096. As for me, I only had my rusty old stun gun and a wavering belief that we could escape. The storage area looked intact from the outside. Dozens of iron shelves were neatly arranged. File boxes were scattered. The emergency lights cast eerie streaks on the walls, with only the sound of dripping water from the cracked ceiling and the distant howl of wind. I quietly asked, "Is this the shortcut?" Anori nodded, signaling the group to stop. She pressed her ear to the floor, listening, then waved her hand. "There's a noise on the other side, possibly surviving guards." Before she could finish, a gruesome shriek echoed from a small passage nearby. We all immediately fell silent. The light cast from the corner of the wall illuminated a gaunt creature, its arms dangling to the ground. Its skin was pale gray, its wide eyes empty and sorrowful. Its head was sunken, its jaw slack. I jumped when I recognized SCP-096, the shy guy. It seemed to be in pain. Its hands trembled as if aware of our presence but hadn't fully identified us. Anori looked in horror at the security personnel holding the scramble boxes. One person gently put a box down, preparing to activate it, but it was too late. A slight misstep and something terrible happened. Someone accidentally kicked a piece of metal. A deafening clang echoed in the silent space. SCP-096 immediately lifted its head, its white eyes wide open, its mouth agape, emitting a hoarse growl. I dared not blink. We had all received basic training. If you look directly at 96's face, it will enter a furious rage and chase you until it tears the victim to shreds. But at this moment, we couldn't do anything else. Anori, however, had managed to put a device over her eyes and ran back towards the iron shelves, shouting, "Scatter, don't look." I stumbled, tripping over a corner of a shelf, quickly turned my back and ducked down, my heart pounding wildly. 96's shriek made my chest vibrate. Immediately, a gunshot cracked, followed by several rapid bursts. I heard metal clanging and the desperate screams of someone in the group. The stun gun in my hand was useless against that nightmarish fury. In my panic, I suddenly noticed an iron door on the right, which seemed to be a secondary tunnel entrance, potentially leading in the same direction as the emergency elevator. If we stayed here, we would die. I crawled along the floor, trying to stay out of 96's attack range. The ground shook with each of its tearing blows. The sound of flesh and skin being ripped echoed in my ears. My stomach churned. I reached out for Anori's hand, but she had disappeared behind the shelves. Only one dying security officer clung to the edge of an iron shelf, his mouth gurgling with blood. I wanted to save him, but seeing 96 standing tall in front, ready to lunge, its soulless eyes now filled with ultimate killing intent, I scurried towards the tunnel door. Behind me, the scream of the unfortunate man was choked off. The tunnel door was tightly shut. I used all my strength to twist the metal wheel. The door was stuck. I panted, wiping away tears, wiping away the cowardice that was consuming me. Then I heard a screech and the door sprang open. I scrambled inside and bolted the lock. Darkness enveloped me, and my heart clenched when I heard 96 shriek outside, a deafening sound that made the wall vibrate. I feared it would tear the door apart. But fortunately, 96 seemed to be focusing on the remaining unfortunate victims rather than pursuing me. My fear turned into guilt. Had I abandoned them? The darkness swallowed me. I turned on my flashlight, illuminating a narrow corridor, rarely used. It led deeper down, not like an escape route to the surface. A sense of instability welled up, but I couldn't go back. Behind me, there was only blood and that monster. At least I was alive to try to help someone else or save myself if I could. I carefully stepped down each metal stair, praying that this path would lead me somewhere safer. But the silence and the darkness made me even more uneasy. It felt like I was slowly descending into the depths of the earth, where the worst things the organization tried to conceal were kept. Occasionally, I heard distant explosions, the screech of metal, or the shaking of the building. I didn't know if it was other entities sweeping through or internal conflict. The winding stairs led me to another iron door. No signs. I placed my hand on it, the door was freezing cold. Breathing out, I gently pushed. Inside was a dimly lit small laboratory with a faint blue light from several test tubes containing strange liquids. The first thing that caught my eye was a touchscreen control panel, displaying "Access granted for Dr. K," I mumbled. "Whose room is this, Dr. K?" Just then, I heard a moan from a corner of the room. Shining my flashlight, I saw a woman in a white lab coat, her hair disheveled, her face pale. She didn't look old, only in her early 30s. Her shoulder was injured, blood soaking her shirt. She whispered, Don't kill me." I rushed over, my voice still trembling. "No, I'm Frederick, a technician. I won't hurt you. It's okay, calm down." She looked at me, her eyes a mix of panic and relief. "You're alive too." I helped her sit, leaning against the wall. From her attire, she was likely a researcher here. "Do you know a way out of here?" She shook her head wearily. "I was trying to escape. They're fighting 96-682, countless, even more terrifying things. I hid in here, then the ceiling collapsed and I got hurt." I looked around, bewildered. Behind her was a document rack. Curious, I opened it and found it full of files about various entities, mostly encrypted, but one document marked with a critical danger level was unlocked. The bold title read, SCP-001. The first page briefly stated, if SCP-001 is activated, other SCP entities will react abnormally or simultaneously awaken, potential global devastation. A chill ran down my spine. So the rumors about SCP-001 weren't mere fantasy. If it was awakening, or if someone intentionally released it, the entire world could face annihilation. The girl, stifling her pain, managed to say, "I'm Kara, Dr. K's assistant. This room holds secrets related to one, a lab researching methods to contain the strongest SCPs, but it's incomplete." I nodded, gently reassuring Kara, then took a bandage from a nearby first aid cabinet and temporarily dressed her wound. Seeing the blood seep through the bandage, I imagined the building above might have become a graveyard. We had to find a way out or at least warn someone about this danger. But to reach the surface, we had to get through that battle. Just thinking about SCP-096 or 682 was enough to fill me with dread. Kara tried to give a weak smile. "Do you think we still have a chance?" I gripped my stun gun, a weapon of little use. "I don't know, but we'll try." The air fell silent for a moment. I heard a small noise on the ceiling, as if someone was moving above. I hoped it wasn't 96, or worse, another SCP tracking survivors. I looked at Kara, trying to find courage. "We have to leave here. We have to find a way up or find any remaining security teams. If we're lucky, they might have heavy weapons or a plane. But what's out there is more than just an SCP breakout." She nodded faintly, her eyes bright with a mix of hope and despair. I took a deep breath, turning on the touchscreen to see if there was any useful data, but everything was encrypted except for a few lines mentioning SCP-001, chain reaction, control capability, power nullification. Everything was fragmented, words disconnected. There was only a brief conclusion. When SCP-001 initiates, the most powerful SCP entities will interact with each other, with catastrophic consequences. I quickly turned it off. The words of that unfortunate researcher were not wrong. This was not merely a sporadic breakout, but a signal for the beginning of a confrontation between the most terrifying entities. This place was just the epicenter, and the shockwaves could spread across the entire world. Could anyone stop it? Or would we merely be witnesses to humanity's demise, buried under the ice? In my mind, questions swirled. Who or what was manipulating all this? Why target the worst possible moment to awaken? There were still no answers, and perhaps only by being willing to sacrifice would we learn the truth. Kara clung to my arm, her voice weak. "Let's go, Frederick." I helped her up, my hand gripping the stun gun. I wasn't sure what awaited us in the darkness, but we had no choice, either face it or die. Deep inside, I prayed for a miracle, though I knew the organization had long ceased to believe in miracles. They believed in practical measures to contain evil. But now, evil was unleashed, and there might be even more terrifying things hidden behind the door that was about to open. Chapter 3. I led Kara through the subterranean corridor, passing abandoned laboratories. My flashlight beam revealed countless items: syringes, chemical boxes, broken briefcases, shattered chairs. At times, we stepped over the corpse of a staff member slumped next to a control panel, their ID badge on their bloody chest ripped to shreds. This silent scene chilled me more than 96's roars. It suggested that this area had been abandoned or even isolated even before the tragedy officially erupted. Kara stumbled, her shoulder wound making every movement difficult. We spoke little, communicating mostly with our eyes, partly to maintain silence, partly because neither of us had anything optimistic to share. Occasionally, the ceiling shook with distant explosions, a reminder of the ongoing nightmare above. Suddenly, a cold voice echoed through the old loudspeaker system. "Warning, multiple Keter-class SCP entities have escaped containment. Damage level at 78%. All remaining personnel are advised to evacuate or seek safe refuge. Emergency submarine at Ice Dock C1 will depart in 60 minutes to leave Greenland." I looked up at the ceiling and softly gasped. An emergency submarine. I didn't know we had Ice Dock C1. Perhaps that's our only way out. Kara nodded, whispering, "We have to reach the upper level and follow the ice tunnel to the dock. It might be far." Her voice choked, understanding the risks, but at least there was hope. I made up my mind. We'll go find the way up now. However, to reach the ice dock, we had to cross many other areas. I remembered hearing colleagues say that sectors D13 and Z were the most problematic, concentrating most of the dangerous SCPs, including 682. I never wanted to encounter it in my life. But if our destination lay beyond, we could hardly avoid passing through those areas. We turned right along a path filled with water pipes. The space here was warmer, as if a large heat source was warming it. I heard water boiling somewhere. In some places, steam rose, forming misty wisps. Kara exhaled, whispering, "The geothermal laboratory." They were researching the possibility of utilizing hot water from underground ice springs, but it seems the system is overloaded. The floor vibrated in waves, water splashed everywhere, and a blast of hot air hit my face as I rounded a corner. This was ironic amidst the deadly cold outside. I cautiously probed each step, fearing that a pipe might explode, scalding us or killing us instantly. Kara clung to the wall, trying to maintain her balance. The space became suffocating, and I heard something like a person hiccuping. We stopped, turning off our flashlights. The dim light revealed an entity crawling close to the ground ahead, moving slowly. Its skin was discolored, its shoulders horribly hunched, and its arms were long and gangly. At first, I thought it was SCP-106, the old man, but then I realized this creature's skin wasn't corrosive. It seemed cracked like dry earth, its large eyes bulging, and its echoing hiccups sent chills down my spine. This creature was neither 96 nor 682. It was possibly a mutated entity or a lesser-known SCP that had just escaped. Whatever it was, I didn't want to encounter it. I backed away, signaling Kara to press herself against the wall. We carefully circled around overturned machinery, the rising steam obscuring our vision. We hoped the mist would hide us from the monster's sight. It seemed luck was on our side in that moment. The monster continued to crawl in the opposite direction, hiccuping a few times like a hungry demon. When it disappeared behind the steam, I signaled Kara to run quickly to the next turn. We tiptoed, our hearts pounding like drums, until we were out of its sight. Both of us stopped, gasping for breath. Kara bit her lip, whispering, "It feels like they're coming from everywhere. I've never seen so many SCPs appear at once." I wiped my sweat, muttering, "Something must have triggered this chaos. It could be one or someone intentionally released them." We continued, saying nothing more. The thought that someone deliberately caused this apocalypse sent shivers down my spine. Deep down, I only hoped to meet a security team or someone equipped to escape together. But the further we went, the more desolation and death we saw. When we reached the end of the geothermal pipe, we saw an upward path. Metal stairs, rusty, led to a round door on the ceiling like a hatch. Kara said, "It probably leads to the upper floor, perhaps the main corridor." I nodded, climbed up first, and tried to turn the wheel. The door was stuck. I gritted my teeth, turning it hard until my hands chafed. Finally, it burst open. Sheets of ice cascaded down, accompanied by a blast of cold air. I poked my head through the opening, shining my flashlight. Another narrow, dark corridor, much colder than below. Kara struggled to climb up after me. We closed the door, hoping to keep whatever was below from following. Standing on the icy floor, I realized this corridor had an old structure. Low ceilings, concrete walls mixed with metal. Nearby were claw marks, a rough surface, and even dried bloodstains. Suddenly, footsteps echoed. I quickly turned off my flashlight, pulling Kara behind a cracked section of the wall. In the darkness, we listened intently. There were many footsteps, at least 2 or 3 people. From their fragmented conversations, I recognized their voices were quite loud, likely security personnel or mercenaries hired urgently by the organization. The organization often mobilized various forces during disasters. I heard something from the tunnel below, perhaps the monsters were pouring out. A hoarse man's voice rang out, "Boss says to block all secondary exits, don't let SCPs spread to the ice dock area." Another replied, "But what about the survivors? Are we just going to block them off too?" "Orders from above. Do you want to argue? Better to sacrifice a few people than to let 682 or 96 reach the submarine. Then we'd have nowhere to hide either." My heart sank. They intended to block all paths. If we encountered this group, we might be shot down as a precaution, but I had no choice but to take the risk, because if we couldn't reach the ice dock, we would surely die. I turned, seeing her look at me with an expression of resigned acceptance. The footsteps faded, and we held our breath for a few more minutes. When I was sure they were gone, I quietly turned on my flashlight to find our way. In the distance, a rusty sign read, "High security area towards ice dock." The sign was heavily defaced, the arrow no longer clear. There was no other way, we followed that path. After about 50 meters, the floor suddenly shook violently, accompanied by a massive explosion. A column of smoke and snow burst from the ceiling. The impact threw me against the wall. My head hit hard, making me dizzy, almost fainting. A few seconds later, I composed myself and swept my flashlight, looking for Kara. She lay sprawled, groaning softly. I rushed to her, helping her up. "Are you badly hurt?" Her arm was scraped and bleeding, but fortunately not broken. The ceiling ahead had collapsed, blocking the path. I heard water gushing, the pipes above must have burst. Icy water poured down, smelling of metal. The entire corridor quickly became a muddy, chaotic mess. I helped Kara retreat, avoiding the rising water. Now there was only a narrow, dark turn to the left. In that moment of despair, I realized we were trapped. And if any entity or another security team was waiting, we wouldn't be able to retreat. But hesitation was useless. We had to move forward. Suddenly, a voice echoed from an old radio in Kara's pocket. It turned out she had a radio, but it had been too jammed to use. Now it emitted static and a faint female voice. "Anyone there? This is Anori." I was stunned. Anori was still alive. She had escaped 96. Kara pulled out the radio, responding with difficulty. "This is Kara with Frederick. We're in the basement area." The signal was intermittent, mixed with explosions. Anori's voice echoed. "I'm trapped in Sector D13. 682 is fighting something. The wall collapsed. Need help." I looked at Kara and shook my head faintly. She also understood that D13 was one of the most chaotic centers, where 682 might be clashing with other entities. Anori's plea was cut off. Before we could respond, the radio went dead. I was desperate. Even if I wanted to save Anori, how could we dare return to the epicenter of that infernal maelstrom? Above, the alarm still howled, metal screeched, and deafening roars and explosions filled the air. In that moment, I realized that the battle of the most powerful SCPs had officially spread beyond control. They were tearing this place apart and could spread even further. Amidst the ice and darkness, we faced a nightmare with no escape. If all life here was truly about to be wiped out, was there any point in struggling? Yet, every time I looked at Kara's pale face, I knew I couldn't give up. Even if we both died, I would make one last stand. Either we die in despair, or we sacrifice ourselves to at least leave a shred of hope for someone to survive. I clasped Kara's hand. Both of us trembled in the icy cold and fear, then nodded faintly to each other. We chose the narrow left turn, a path no one knew where it would lead, perhaps even to the gates of hell. But who knew, at the end of the tunnel, a faint ray of light might be waiting. Chapter 4. The deeper we went, the gloomier the air became. The walls were covered with icy moss and dark stains. Many cables dangled from the ceiling, occasionally sparking with blue electricity. Kara started to gasp for breath, her shoulder wound worsening. I had to stop and rummage for the first aid kit. Fortunately, I still had a bottle of antibiotics and some bandages. As I changed her dressing, I noticed her face had become noticeably paler. She stifled a painful whisper. "Frederick, do you see this light? It keeps flickering on the wall." I looked up, realizing a sky-blue light was reflecting off the wall at the end of the corridor. There was a faint humming sound. Curious, I helped her move closer. It turned out to be a partially open door, with light emanating from within like blue LED lights. A rusty sign above the door read, "Low-frequency interference room. Special experiment." I wasn't sure what low-frequency interference meant, but my instinct told me we might find some tool to contact the outside, or at least this place could offer temporary shelter. I pushed the door open. The blue light illuminated a rather spacious area with many machines. In the middle of the room, a machine resembling a tall antenna rotated slowly, emitting a continuous hum. A large screen next to it displayed fluctuating readings, including a topographical map of the area around the station. The air here was relatively intact, with only a few small cracks on the walls. I locked the door to prevent intruders or wandering SCPs. Kara collapsed onto a chair, her eyes half closed as if utterly exhausted. I tried pressing a few buttons on the control panel. A signal bar showed that the internal communication frequency was still open, but the signal was extremely weak. I suddenly remembered Anori's radio call. Perhaps she needed help. I hesitated, then pressed the transmit button. "Anori, can you hear me? Respond. This is Frederick in the C room, the low-frequency interference room. Are you nearby?" No response. Instead, a deep male voice crackled, slightly distorted. "Who is that? This signal the organization." I had never heard this voice before. "Yes, I'm Frederick, a technician. Who are you?" "We're part of the rapid response team, under orders from Council 5, deployed to this facility to salvage important documents and contain some targets." "What's your situation?" I almost burst into tears. "Finally, rescue." I quickly summarized the situation, explaining that the research facility was mostly destroyed, many SCPs had escaped, and we were trapped. The male voice was silent for a moment, then said, "Listen, we can't hold the submarine for too long. The countdown is about 45 minutes. If you want to escape, you must reach Ice Dock C1. We'll do our best to secure the dock. As for the SCPs, we make no promises. I shivered. We'll try to get there. But sectors D13, Z, 682, 96, they're causing massive destruction. Is there any way to avoid them? He replied curtly. There's no completely safe shortcut, but if you're in the interference room, you might find instructions. The equipment there contains detailed blueprints. Figure it out yourself. We have other things to deal with. A loud explosion echoed through the transmission, and the connection was cut. I turned to access the computer. Fortunately, this system wasn't damaged. After trying a few commands, I finally opened the beta-level underground map. The screen showed a route to Ice Dock C1, passing through a sea discharge pipe, then through a secondary armory, and finally circling around a long-abandoned mini-train station. Kara leaned on my shoulder, her voice weary. At least we have a direction, but do we have time? I gritted my teeth. 45 minutes. Shall we try? She replied, of course. I turned back to the antenna machine in the middle of the room and saw a notice board. It turned out this system was once used to emit jamming frequencies or manipulate the behavior of certain SCPs sensitive to brainwaves. I wasn't sure if it would work on 96 or 682, but maybe Kara could figure out how to use it. She shook her head. It's not complete. To control powerful entities, you need precise input. And I'm afraid we don't have enough time or information. This system might even infuriate them more. Hearing that, I reluctantly dismissed the idea. The pale blue light from the machine made the scene even more sinister, like a soulless torture chamber. Outside, the cold, deadly atmosphere persisted. I helped Kara stand up, and both of us prepared to leave. This sturdy metal door was very secure, but if we stayed here, we would miss our last chance. I didn't want to be trapped inside when the SCPs took over completely or destroyed the facility. Opening the door, a biting cold wind hit my face. I felt the air currents churning as if an explosion had just changed the pressure somewhere. In the distance, roars mixed with the clanging of metal. Hidden behind those chaotic sounds, I heard a deeper, vague sound, as if echoing from deep underground. It could be the breath of a colossal entity, or just the north wind whistling through a crack. I dared not speculate further. We followed the corridor, relying on the memorized map to head towards the discharge pipe. This path might lead to the mini-train station and then to the ice dock. Step by step, I told myself to be cautious, but my heart still trembled. It was hard to describe the fear when any corner could unleash a bloodthirsty SCP. Kara bit her lip, trying to stay alert. Along the way, we encountered strange, religiously charged symbols drawn on the walls. The crude drawings mixed ancient characters with triangular symbols and fiery eyes. I didn't know who or what drew them, but I couldn't help but associate them with documents about ancient entities or demons held by the organization. Perhaps in this dark night, not only 96 or 682 had awakened, but also older beings, and they were slowly finding their way out of 1,000 years of ice. I thought to myself, could SCP-001 be the key linking them all, awakening even the ancient demons? But I dismissed the thought because for now, survival was my top priority. We rounded a corner, our eyes almost blind in the darkness, with only the faint beam of the flashlight. Suddenly, Kara stopped, pulling my arm. "Do you hear that?" I strained my ears. At first, there was only the wind, then a faint whisper echoed, as if from behind the wall. The whisper was in a strange language, melodious yet terrifying. I felt it wasn't human. The wall from which the whispers emanated was riddled with cracks. For some reason, a chill ran down my spine. Kara trembled. "Hurry, Frederick," I nodded. Both of us tried to quickly move away from that eerie area. After another 100 meters, we encountered a large gate with Discharge Pipe A3 written on it. Just as I was about to approach, I heard frantic footsteps and shouting voices. Several flashlight beams swept across the wall. I quickly pulled Kara to hide behind a pillar. Peeking out, I saw a group of about 3 people in black armor, likely special security forces or a rapid response team. They were placing explosives near the pipe gate. One person yelled, "Quick, we have to block all routes the monsters can take to the sea." I suddenly understood. They planned to collapse this passage to prevent SCPs from escaping. If they did that, we would also lose our only path to the train station. I faintly heard them mentioning powerful SCPs, especially 682, slithering throughout the facility. Seeing their tense eyes, I was certain they had orders to prioritize containment over rescuing people. There wasn't much time to think. Either we accepted being trapped, or we risked rushing out, hoping to persuade them to let us through. Kara looked at me, her eyes pleading. I knew she also hoped they had a conscience. We couldn't hesitate. I took a deep breath, stepped out, and raised my hands. Don't shoot, I'm a technician from the organization. These are survivors. All three startled, turning their guns on me. Flashlight beams shone directly into my face. A cold voice spoke. Stand still. Identify yourself. My name is Frederick. This is Kara, an injured researcher. We have to get to the ice dock. The submarine will depart soon. Please don't detonate the explosives. We mean no harm. One person shone a light on Kara, seeing her injured and pale face, and hesitated slightly. But another barked, "Our orders are to seal off all possible routes. Anyone who interferes will be considered a threat to the mission." I forced myself to suppress my fear and spoke quickly. "We'll die if we can't get through. Besides, we're just humans, but those SCPs are much stronger. Are you sure blocking this route will stop 682? It can tear through concrete." My words made them waver. The one who seemed to be the commander snapped. "You think 682 can wade through this pipe to the sea and swim to land? If it gets out of here, the whole world is in danger. We have to block it." At this point, Kara bit her lip and spoke weakly. "Please, let us through first. 2 survivors, how could that affect the plan?" The commander pondered for a few seconds. Finally, he signaled his teammates to retreat and temporarily dismantle the explosive package. "Go quickly. We'll wait 5 minutes for you, then we'll detonate." I breathed a sigh of relief, quickly helping Kara run through the pipe gate. The opening door shrieked, a blast of cold wind hitting our faces. On the other side was a long, curved tunnel with water pooling. The smell of damp mold mixed with the scent of the sea. We tried our best to move quickly, hearing their countdown. Each second felt like a knife pushing us into a race with death. Just about 10 meters past the door, the commander yelled, "Get down, get down." I immediately fell to my knees, pulling Kara down with me. A deafening explosion echoed, the shockwave traveling through the icy ground. My chest vibrated, my head spun, and then fragments of concrete collapsed behind us, sealing off the way back. I looked back and saw a flash of fire in the smoke and dust. We were fortunate not to have been thrown by the blast. So the way back was gone. Now only the path ahead led us deeper towards the ice sea. There, the submarine offered hope of survival. Behind us was a living hell with maddened monsters. At this moment, I knew that turning back meant death. All hope was focused on what lay ahead. I helped Kara up again. Both of us continued walking, despite our weary bodies. We ventured into the damp tunnel, the sounds of the brutal battle behind us echoing in our minds. Was everything predetermined? And was I just a small pawn witnessing terrifying forces clashing for reasons I would never understand? All I knew was that as long as I was alive, I would keep moving forward, hoping to find light in this icy nightmare. We didn't know that the path ahead would unleash even more horrors, and many SCPs, previously only in files, would now emerge and coalesce, creating a battle beyond human control. But that is the story of the next chapters, where Kara and I were forced to enter the heart of the fiercest conflict. Chapter 5. I led Kara through the narrow tunnel, trying to keep my flashlight from going out while listening to every echoing sound. The dripping water reminded me of cracks that could suddenly open underfoot, or worse, something about to crawl up from the underground sewer. We trudged step by step, trying to control our panic. At least we still had a chance to reach Ice Dock C1 and escape this place. Every freezing breath reminded me that time was running out. The rapid response team wouldn't wait long, and the escaped SCPs certainly wouldn't show mercy. The air was heavy with the briny smell of seaweed and seawater, mixed with the musty odor from the discharge pipe. Occasionally, I saw streaks of black grime clinging to the old steel pipes, as if no one had maintained them for years. Kara walked with difficulty, her face pale. Looking at her reddish shoulder beneath the makeshift bandage, I wondered how much longer she could endure. We silently moved towards the faint light at the end of the tunnel. It was a patch of sky revealed through a small crack in the broken ceiling, wide enough for cold wind to seep in, making me shiver. As we got closer, a strong gust of wind swept snowflakes past us, swirling white in the flashlight beam. I looked up. Above, the dark night sky occasionally flashed with red light from distant flares. Perhaps a rescue team or aircraft was sweeping Greenland's airspace, but looking at the SCP's destructive speed, I doubted any traditional rescue. I noticed I was starting to hear the distant gunshots more clearly, mixed with roars. Several piercing screeches intertwined like metal grinding against metal. In this environment, sounds traveled further, making it impossible for me to pinpoint their exact location. All I knew was that a fierce battle was still raging. Perhaps 682 was confronting 96 or another entity. We were still underground, so at least we hadn't encountered them directly yet. But who could be sure that one of them wouldn't find its way here? I told myself to quickly reach the mini-train station that would lead to the ice dock area. Trying to remember the map in my head, I knew I had to follow this corridor, then cross an iron bridge over a drainage tunnel, and then turn right. However, there was no guarantee that path would still be intact. Just as that thought flickered, I jolted from an incredibly strong tremor. The ground beneath us shook as if hit by artillery fire. Kara lurched forward, almost falling. I had to grip her tightly, stumbling as I clung to the wall. Chunks of concrete rained down from the ceiling, creating a hazy dust cloud that obscured our vision. When the tremor subsided, I heard a roar echoing from the opening above. It sounded like a pained, suppressed but still furious roar of a giant beast. It could be 682, as few SCPs resembled such a creature. Or perhaps it was something else, an ancient entity that had just been awakened. Whatever it was, I didn't want to stay to find out. I quickly helped Kara over the pile of rubble, heading towards the iron bridge that I was sure must be nearby. As expected, after a few dozen meters, we stopped before a metal structure spanning a deep chasm below. My flashlight beam swept down, and I was horrified to realize that below was a huge pool of water with a rushing current. Occasionally, waves crashed against the walls, emitting a biting cold. The narrow bridge was just wide enough for two people to walk side by side. The steel handrail was covered in rust. I swallowed hard, fearing it would collapse at any moment. Kara tried to stay calm, but I could clearly hear her ragged breathing. Her shoulder was trembling. I reminded myself to be strong because if I showed fear, she would become even more distraught, so I slowly stepped onto the bridge. With each step, the bridge creaked. In the middle of the bridge, I shone my flashlight to the other side. A silent metal door. On the door were the white letters, GA2. My heart leaped. Just getting past that, we would reach the subway station area. From that station, if it was still operational, we could shorten our journey. But when we were only a few meters from the other side, I suddenly saw a figure dart out from a dark corner, collapsing right in front of the door. He wore orange protective clothing with a D-Class logo on his back. That made my face go pale. D-Class personnel were usually recruited by the Organization for Experiments used for dangerous missions. If they were wandering here, it meant the D-Class containment area was also disrupted. And if he was here, it was very likely something else was pursuing him. Indeed, as expected, just as we were about to call out, a distorted figure appeared behind the man, with disheveled hair and glowing red eyes in the darkness. As soon as I saw it, the D-Class screamed in terror, flailing his arms for help, but it was too late. The entity lunged, plunging its claws into his shoulder, tearing fiercely, sending blood spraying. I took a sharp, cold breath, a chill running down my spine. The flashlight beam swept across, and for a moment, I saw a face half human, half beast, with a distorted jaw and sharp fangs. This was not a famous SCP I knew. Perhaps it was just a mutated subject or a hybrid project that had been released. The horror was evident. The organization had researched or contained all sorts of monsters that we knew nothing about. The D-Class struggled weakly, then went limp. The monster growled, gnawing on its victim as if savoring it. The gruesome sight made my stomach churn. I heard Kara gasp. Worse, the monster suddenly turned, seemingly sniffing us out on the bridge. We had to act immediately. Retreating would be tantamount to offering ourselves as bait. With no way back, we could only fight or run past it to get through the A2 station door. I gripped the stun gun, knowing it wouldn't be very effective but willing to risk it. "Stay here," I whispered to Kara. Although in this situation, both of us knew no place was safe. I narrowed my eyes, aimed at the monster, and squeezed the trigger. A spark of electricity flashed, shocking it and making it roar. Seizing the opportunity, I shouted, "Run, Kara, run!" She limped and scrambled across the bridge. I fired another shot. The monster retreated a few steps but didn't fall. Its red eyes glared, its rough skin emitting a burnt smell from the electric shock. I dared not waste time. A single second of delay, and it would regain its strength. I rushed past the D-Class's corpse, helped Kara, and pushed hard on the A2 station door. The door creaked but didn't budge. The monster behind us roared, preparing to lunge. Panic made my hands tremble. Kara was also gasping for breath. I gritted my teeth and twisted the doorknob with all my might. The door burst open, throwing us inside. I didn't forget to kick it shut hard. Outside, the monster slammed against the door, trying to tear it open. The only thing holding the door shut was a large metal bar, likely an emergency lock. I twisted it to secure the door, hearing the monster screeching on the other side. I wasn't sure if this door was strong enough to hold it back. But at least for now, we had a few seconds to breathe. Inside Station A2, darkness was absolute. I turned on my flashlight and saw the path down to the platform extending along. Ahead, the wall was covered with old posters, seemingly from years ago, advertising an internal rail line. Dust had accumulated in thick layers. It seemed this place had been abandoned for a long time, or the organization had only recently used it as a storage area for a few things. The musty smell filled the air, and every step echoed clearly in the enclosed space. We followed the flashlight beam, hoping to find an operational mini-train car or a continuous corridor leading to the port. The rapid response team said the submarine would depart in just over half an hour. If we didn't make it in time, we would be permanently trapped here, facing an uneven battle. The sound of metal scraping the signboard behind the door was now fading. Perhaps the monster realized the door was too sturdy, or it had other interests. Still, I didn't dare to rejoice too soon. SCPs or mutated entities were often smarter than we imagined. Sometimes they would find another way, but the immediate priority was to find a path. Kara was now leaning against the wall, breathing heavily. I quickly asked, "Are you okay? Can you still endure?" She nodded faintly, her voice weak. "Just keep going, I'll try to follow." I nodded, helping her down the stairs to the platform. The flashlight swept over the cluttered seats, an old vending machine, and then the pitch-dark tracks. A concrete tunnel stretched far into the east. Suddenly, my eyes lit up when I saw a mini-train car at the corner of the station, powered by electricity from an overhead rail. The train's body was relatively intact, the glass slightly cracked but seemingly not completely destroyed. I approached, my stomach churning. The organization's logo with a code number was printed on the car door. I tried to pull the door. It didn't budge, probably locked. I looked around and saw a small control panel mounted on the wall. Using my flashlight, I realized the system still had backup power. It just needed a card swipe or a code entry. I heard Kara rummaging in her pocket. She pulled out her staff ID card. I inserted the card into the slot, my eyes fixed on the screen. The signal clattered, then flickered, failing to confirm. Fortunately, the screen finally displayed. Access granted, Level 2 personnel. The train car door gently slid open, kicking up dust. I quickly helped Kara in. Inside, there were no lights and the seats were covered in dust. But fortunately, the seats were intact, not torn. I seated her on the front bench, then checked the control panel near the driver's seat. This was an automatic train car. Normally, you just set the route and go. However, since this place had been abandoned, there was no guarantee the track system outside was still functional. Still, there was no time for hesitation. I pressed a few basic buttons, revealing a primitive interface. A few lines of text appeared. "Minimum power, please connect backup generator." I cursed under my breath, then remembered that there was usually a separate generator room around the station. Maybe it wasn't broken and just needed to be activated to provide enough power for the train car. I turned to her, lowering my voice. "Wait for me. I have to find a way to start the generator." "Stay here, close the door for safety." Seeing Kara's pale face, I knew it was dangerous to leave her alone, but I couldn't drag her everywhere anymore. She bit her lip and nodded. I pulled the door, hearing it creak, then close. Inside, it was pitch dark, with only my flashlight beam filtering through the cracked glass. Looking at Kara through the broken glass, I could only nod gently to reassure her, then stepped back, determined to return as soon as possible. So I walked alone across the deserted platform, trying not to make a sound. Just then, a small noise echoed from the adjacent tunnel, like metal clanging rhythmically. I turned off my flashlight, held my breath, my heart pounding wildly. Now, everything that seemed familiar became threatening. A piece of paper, a gust of wind, could all be signs of disaster. I cautiously approached. From where I was, the tunnel was pitch black, with only a faint glow from an old signboard. The clicking sound continued. Click, 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 as if someone was tapping on a pipe. My instinct told me to stay away from there and look for the generator in another direction. But then I heard a very faint whisper. Could it be another survivor, like Anori or another staff member? I hesitated. Finally, the human part of me overcame the fear. If someone was still alive, I couldn't abandon them. Maybe they could help activate the generator faster. I tiptoed closer, hugging the wall. At the turn, I shone my flashlight down and saw dried bloodstains extending into the hidden corner. Not a good sign. I leaned closer, my heart pounding frantically. The pungent, metallic smell hit me. Leaning against the wall was a person in a lab coat, their head slumped down. I trembled as I touched their shoulder. It was ice cold and lifeless. The clicking sound continued, seemingly right behind the corner. I forced myself to move forward. As I turned the corner, my flashlight beam landed on a gaunt figure in a black cloak, wearing something like a white mask on its head, holding a sharp blade in both hands. He was no ordinary human. The smell of chemicals hit my nose, and I shivered, recognizing him. This was SCP-049, the Plague Doctor. I had read his file. An entity who believed he had to cure humanity by turning victims into animated corpses. Anyone he touched would become a deformed patient. He was hunched over a body, as if studying or dissecting it. The clicking sound was his blade gently tapping the wall as he moved. When my flashlight beam reached him, SCP-049 slowly turned his head. I choked, frozen, his eyes hidden behind the opaque white mask staring intensely at me. The whole world seemed to stop for a second. If he lunged, I only had a few shots left in my stun gun. I didn't even know if it would work on 49. He spoke in a steady, raspy voice, exactly like a Victorian doctor. "Are you infected? Don't worry, I can cure you." My breath caught in my throat, my hands sweating. I didn't want to become a victim of his gruesome cure. I don't know how, but I managed to squeeze out a few words. I'm not sick, don't come closer." He tilted his head slightly as if observing. "I am busy treating the patient here. Do not interrupt if you do not carry the pestilence." His voice was calm. But I clearly understood he would kill me if he thought I was infected. In that moment, I was glad that my thick technician's jacket somewhat hid the bloodstains on me. If 49 saw the blood, he might think I was sick and attack. I retreated slowly, trying to maintain distance. At this moment, 49 seemed to return to observing the corpse at his feet, his movements cold. A bit of luck made him no longer pay attention to me. I sighed in relief, took a few more steps back, then turned and ran like mad. The clicking sound of the knife still echoed in my mind, each rhythm like a nightmare. Now I definitely had to stay away from this area. I just hoped 49 wouldn't decide to track me. I returned to the platform, my heart filled with anxiety. Seeing the sign for the generator room on the side of the walkway, I was overjoyed. Through the rotten wooden door, I saw a small, dusty generator. Next to it was a tangled electrical cabinet, exactly what I needed. I opened the cabinet and checked the circuit breaker. This system still had some backup power. I quickly flipped the main switch, hearing the engine rumble. The indicator light flickered green. I hoped that was enough power to start the train. The generator's gentle hum filled the space. A wave of elation washed over me. But before joy could fully settle, a burst of chaotic sounds suddenly came from the platform. I guess the monster outside or some deranged individual was breaking into the train car or attacking Kara. My heart pounded. I jumped up, grabbed the stun gun, and rushed towards the train. Reaching it, I saw the train car door still closed, no signs of forced entry. But at the edge of the platform, dust flew everywhere, and a tall, hunched, dark gray creature was growling. It was facing the train car, as if it had smelled someone inside. Its stature was too familiar a mutated form of SCP-682, or 682 itself undergoing regeneration. Its movements, the sharp spikes protruding along its spine, its jagged teeth. My hair stood on end. I secretly thought, could it be 682 itself? The creature moved step by step on the platform, its back hunched, its claws scraping the floor, creating a rustling sound. A pungent, foul odor permeated the air. I glanced through the train car window and saw Kara hunched over, her hands trembling, gripping the backup stun gun I had left behind. She was still alive, but a single pounce from that monster would be enough to tear open the fragile door. "Damn it," I muttered. "I'm not strong enough to hold off this monster." If it truly was 682, ordinary firearms were useless, let alone my old, worn-out stun gun. In a flash, my mind raced, considering all possibilities. According to the documents, 682 hated all life. It killed everything in its path, almost impossible to stop. Perhaps most of the facility was in ruins because of it. I retreated, hoping to blend into the darkness, but it was useless. It had smelled me. Its yellow eyes suddenly darted towards me, roaring, its tail lashing out and shattering a section of the wall. I suddenly understood. If I didn't distract it, Kara would be attacked. The train wouldn't start in time. I gritted my teeth, aimed the stun gun, and fired a shot at its neck. An electric spark flashed, creating a piercing crackle. The monster shrieked and spun towards me. Black slime oozed from its jaws. Its eyes gleamed with pure savagery. Damn it! I only had time to think that before the creature lunged with terrifying speed. I rolled to one side, the gun hitting the ground and sliding away. 682 swiped a claw, sending fragments of brick flying everywhere. Sweat drenched my shirt, my heart felt like it would burst. Its body was massive, and some parts were still smoking as if it had just sustained a wound from acid or some other corrosive substance, undoubtedly remnants from its old containment cell. It was a pity that this immortal lizard was always a persistent nightmare. I had no weapons left. Kara was trapped in the car, waiting for power to start the train. How could I hold out for even a few dozen seconds? 682's crazed eyes were fixed on me. It roared, charging like a storm. In desperation, I turned and ran, jumping down to the tracks below the platform, trying to run along the narrow path. I heard its roar behind me, the sound of its feet shaking the floor. I dared not look back, just ran headlong. Dust choked my nose, my eyes stung. A deafening metallic screeching sound echoed. I guessed 682 was tearing through the tracks or slamming into the wall to pursue me. I hoped that at this moment, Kara could start the train and get out of here. As for me, it was highly unlikely I would escape. But at least I had to buy time. If sacrificing my life meant another person survived, I would take the risk. Just as I thought that, a small explosion suddenly erupted from behind, accompanied by a blue flash. Wind lashed against my back. I stumbled and fell, hitting my head on the side of the tracks. The pain made me see stars, but I was still conscious. I quickly looked up and saw a familiar figure firing at 682. Anori. She was holding a large energy blaster, bright electric light embedding itself in the monster's flank. Behind her, another security officer. They appeared like a whirlwind, continuing to unleash a barrage of shots. I blinked, unable to believe my eyes. Amidst the ruins, Anori and her teammates had also found their way here. 682 roared, thrashed its tail, scattering concrete, but each burst of energy fire made it retreat, enraged. So they had specialized weapons unlike my old stun gun. After years of studying 682, the organization still hadn't managed to destroy it, but at least they could inflict pain and hold it back for a moment. I seized the opportunity to crawl to the edge of the tracks. I yelled, "Kara is on the train car, she's injured." Anori replied, panting, "Go save her, we'll hold this monster for a bit longer. Hurry." I didn't hesitate, running headlong back to the platform, weaving through the rubble. As I ran, I looked back and saw Anori and two security officers holding their ground, firing continuously at 682. Thanks to them, the beast was somewhat contained. Perhaps it would take a few more minutes for it to adapt and counterattack. It was during those few life-or-death minutes that Kara and I could escape. Back at the train car, I pressed the door open button. The electrical mechanism clicked and the door slid open. I rushed in and saw Kara slumped in the aisle between two benches. Her eyes were closed, her breathing weak. On the train floor, drops of blood. "Kara, come on," I said, helping her up. My heart pounded, terrified at the thought of her dying. On the control panel, the lights were green. The generator had supplied enough power for the train to start. I quickly entered the commands, flipped the switch. The engine rumbled and the train car vibrated violently. Through the window, I saw 682 struggling with Anori's group, roaring incessantly. Not much time left. "Praying everything still works," I muttered, then gripped the co-driver's handle and pressed the forward button. A strong force pushed us forward. The train shook, the gears on the ceiling creaked. It began to roll along the tunnel. I leaned over to support Kara, trying to stabilize her in her seat. Outside, the roars and gunshots grew fainter. The train plunged into darkness with only faint headlights at the front. My heart hadn't yet calmed, my mind reeling from what we had just been through. Kara was still warm, but she was fading in my arms. I whispered, "Hang in there. We're almost at the ice dock. Someone will treat you." For a moment, I shivered, remembering 49, the one who called himself a doctor. How ironic. I was hoping for a real doctor, while this place was full of death doctors. The train car continued to roll, carrying two weary survivors into a pitch-black tunnel with no idea if hell or hope awaited us. But at least we were still alive, and that was the most important thing right now. In my mind, the thought of the battle between the most dangerous SCPs still echoed like a death knell. 682, 96, 49, and countless other terrifying things. Would they destroy all of Greenland, spread across the world, or would a more powerful force emerge? I gripped Kara's hand, looking out the dusty side window, vowing to myself that I would survive, that I would get her out of here, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The mini train shook rhythmically, piercing through the suffocating darkness as if it had been buried for centuries. Sitting close to the window, I felt the eerie creak of gears on the ceiling, interspersed with Kara's faint breaths beside me. The train wasn't fast, but at least it was moving, taking us away from the howling monster 682 at Station A2. The train compartment was quite short, with only 2 rows of seats facing each other. Dust swirled in the dim light. I laid Kara down, leaning against the back of the seat. The bandage on her shoulder was stained red with blood. Coupled with the recent impact, her condition had clearly worsened. Her eyes were half closed, her lips dry and pale. I took off my jacket and draped it gently around her to keep her warm. In this biting cold, another moment's delay, and she might lose consciousness completely. The train rounded a bend, slowing down. On the control panel, the energy gauge continued to drop. I realized we couldn't run forever. This track was probably designed to lead near the ice dock. But would that old, soft backup generator be strong enough to get us to our destination? Each light on the tunnel wall flickered off and on. The train stalling mid-journey was entirely possible. Although consumed by anxiety, my mind still churned with the question, had Anori and the other security personnel escaped? They bravely fired at 682 to cover our escape. Anori's image came to mind. She was always fierce, ready to take risks. I didn't know if she had a plan for herself or if it was all just survival instinct. But I knew that if any of those entities were still free, we couldn't celebrate too soon. Because the destination of SCP-682, 96, 49, or any other monsters certainly wasn't just to stay underground. Kara stirred, her lips moving. I leaned close, hearing her whisper very faintly, "Free." "Frederick, don't leave me." My heart clenched. I held her hand, trying to reassure her. "No, I won't, I'll get you out of here." She closed her eyes, drifting into a semi-conscious state. I placed my hand on her forehead, feeling an unusual heat. She had a fever, possibly from infection. I sighed, looking around the train, hoping to find something useful. Suddenly, my eyes landed on an old board, plastered in the back compartment. Evacuation procedure, emergency waterway, access ice dock C1. Below it was an M symbol, indicating an average travel time of 15 minutes from Station A2 to the dock. That was if the train was operating normally. We had been traveling for about 5 minutes, meaning we had 10 minutes left, if we were lucky. The problem was, would the train hold up? I sat down in the co-driver's seat, trying to flip a few switches to conserve energy. The lights on the train dimmed, leaving only a faint glow. I didn't expect much, but every little bit helped. Outside, the tunnel was pitch black, suddenly shaking violently, metal clanging loudly. The train lurched through another winding section. I felt like it would derail at any moment. After the tremor, I was horrified to realize that a section of the tunnel ahead had partially collapsed, with bricks and rocks strewn across more than half of the tracks. I panicked and slammed the emergency brake. The wheels on the ceiling shrieked, sparking. The train screeched to a halt, shaking for a moment, then stopped completely. A few meters from the pile of debris, my heart pounded, cold sweat pouring down. We almost crashed straight into it and were buried alive. Now there was no way. The train couldn't get through. I silently cursed my luck. Having just escaped 682, I was now stuck with a collapsed tunnel. With no other choice, I had to find a way to clear the bricks or walk through. But at a glance, the broken concrete was piled high, some slabs weighing hundreds of kilograms, certainly impossible to clear in a few minutes. And time was not on our side. I decided, we have to walk. If we could get past the rubble, perhaps the next section of the tunnel would be clear. I turned back to help Kara. She opened her eyes, her voice weak. "Walk," I nodded softly. "The train's stuck. We have no other choice." She reluctantly nodded, leaning on my shoulder to stand. Each step made her groan softly. It must have been very painful, but there was no other option. I climbed out of the train, stepping onto the damp, musty tracks. The cold from the concrete made my bones creak. Pulling Kara down, I bit my lip, supporting her by my shoulder, telling her to hold onto me, careful not to slip. She nodded. We slowly crossed the pile of rubble. Each time we stepped on a concrete slab, it would sink or roll, almost making both of us fall. I tried to keep my flashlight on the path, sweat soaking my shirt despite the biting cold around us. After only a few meters, Kara was gasping for breath, her face paler. I stifled a sigh, knowing she was exhausted, but if we stopped, we would surely be stuck here. I quickly whispered encouragement, hoping she would hold on a little longer. Finally, we got past the debris and jumped onto a relatively flat section of the tunnel floor. The tracks continued ahead, disappearing into the darkness. I glanced at the old clock mounted on the wall. If it was still working, we had about 10 to 15 minutes to make the submarine's departure. Faster, I reminded myself, but before I could take another step, a strange sound echoed from the tunnel ceiling. A rushing sound like water, plus the creaking of metal bending. I looked up. The tunnel ceiling was cracked open, water pouring down like a waterfall. This water source must have been connected to the sea or an underground spring. By instinct, I jumped back, pulling Kara out of the way, narrowly avoiding being swept away by the strong current. White foam poured down, reaching our ankles in just a few seconds. If the water kept rushing down like this tunnel would soon be completely flooded. I yelled over the roar, "Run! Keep running!" Kara nodded, her legs stumbling as she waded with me through the rushing water. The terribly cold seawater seeped through my clothes, making my legs numb. The salty taste filled my nose, and both of us shivered violently. A few more tremors from the ceiling, possibly because the SCPs above continued their destruction. The crack widened, and more water poured down, mixing with rubble and concrete. We were almost racing against the rising flood. Each section of track, each distance, seemed endless. Both of us stumbled and fell, splashing water everywhere. I saw Kara gradually losing strength, but she absolutely couldn't stop because the water was almost up to our knees. Another minute and we might drown. Ahead, I shouted when I saw a large steel door on the tunnel wall, higher than the water level. On it were small white letters, "Emergency Exit Port." That was the only way out I saw. Without thinking much, I helped Kara wade towards it, pushing through the strong current to grab the doorknob. Fortunately, the door wasn't locked. I pulled hard and seawater flooded through the crack. Struggling, I managed to pull Kara inside. Once in, I used all my strength to push the door shut, blocking most of the water. Several concrete blocks crashed down behind us, but the door luckily held firm. Gasping for breath, I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. Kara seemed to be unconscious. Her eyes were half open, her mouth mumbling indistinctly. I quickly pulled her out of the puddle to prevent her from getting colder. My flashlight beam swept around, showing me that I was in a gently sloping corridor, seemingly leading upwards. The air was cold, but at least it wasn't flooded. I tried shouting, "Is anyone here?" No reply, only my own echo. I fumbled for a lock to secure the door, finally managing to wedge a metal bar that had fallen from the frame to prevent the door from bursting open due to water pressure. Done with that, I carried Kara, walking while hearing the ominous roar of water from behind, each step echoing with dry sounds. This tunnel was quite narrow, with a low ceiling, and old neon lights on the walls flickered weakly. The whistling wind from above probably meant the exit was near. After climbing a few dozen steps up the slope, I saw a second iron door, a rusty sign printed with the words, "Control Gate Number 2, Surface Exit." A faint light peeked through a crack, and I suddenly realized we were close to the surface. I pushed the door. This time, it opened easily, revealing a strange sight. Kara and I stepped into a cluttered warehouse filled with wooden crates, diving equipment, life vests, oxygen tanks. Cold wind from a broken window lashed at our faces. Snow drifted gently across the floor, mixing with clear footprints. It seemed someone had passed through here not long ago. Looking around, I noticed a large passage on the left where a sign hung, "Hangar leading to port, level 3 personnel only." To the right was a cracked window, overlooking a vast expanse of snow. Darkness still enveloped everything, with only distant flashes of fiery red and a few columns of black smoke rising, evidence that Greenland was in chaos. I pulled Kara to a corner of the room where some wooden pallets could serve as a temporary resting place for her. She opened her eyes slightly, her breathing ragged, revealing pain. I rubbed my forehead, my mind reeling, not knowing how far the port was, and she was almost exhausted. A biting, cold gust of wind swept through, making me shiver. Like this, even if we reached the port, we might.